What I am always happy to have is the presence of Emory Hunt of CBS Sports and Football Game Plan here with us on 104.5 The Zone. It's his second tour of duty on the radio station today because M's a very popular guy. He's the mayor of the Combine at this time of year. What's happening, big dog?
Nothing much, man. How you doing, man? Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I am doing great. I am so curious to see what the Titans are going to do with the number 1 overall draft pick, and I love that you are way more optimistic than I have heard anybody be about this professional football team, and the audience is grateful for that too, Emory, because I've been dumping on them for 6 months.
Listen, we know football is not about one guy, but at times it can be about one guy, and we saw this with Washington. And I said this after Washington drafted Jayden Daniels, that this was a team that wasn't that far off. They could get to that 6th or 7th seed in the NFC and make the postseason, which sounds weird for a team that was picking 2nd overall. And I felt that way about Tennessee because, to me, Tennessee is one of those teams that still has a lot of talent individually. We know they were banged up on defense. We know they got some guys back healthy. And we know, offensively speaking, they got good backs, have a good receiver that could add more talent to that. They got a good tight end. There are some things in place for these guys to really, especially in this division where they've played everybody tough, and they were a few plays away from probably beating a couple of these teams in the division. It can go either way. Now, what makes the AFC tougher than the NFC, that everybody is good. You know what I'm saying? So you got to, even the Raiders are competitive. So you really have to pick your spots to be successful, and I think Tennessee can do that with either one of these guys.
And that's why I appreciate your perspective, not just because I know you put in the work and I know you study these guys, and not just the guys at the top of the draft, but you're very thorough throughout the course of your career documenting things for Football Game Plan. At FBall Game Plan is where you can follow him, of course, on the socials. Why do you think the narrative has been so unfair, specific to the top 2 guys?
I believe, I said this last year, when folks don't like the 2 guys at the top, we'll start to hear that this class is trash, 2026 or the following year. But history is the same all the time. We ignore it. They said the same thing about the upcoming class with Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. And I told people then, no, this class is good. Don't bypass this. We heard about 2023's class with Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson. All 3 of those guys ended up going to first. And people thought I was crazy when I brought up Richardson in July of that season, because people was like, still only played 9 games. What are you talking about? But after the first game against Utah, he was everybody's Heisman favorite. Yeah. And then so that got him. But you could see certain things about that. So every class, when people talk about this class is not as good or this class is not as top heavy, they're really just talking about the top, because every class has a great chance for you to upgrade your QB2, which we know, especially since COVID, you're going to need your backup quarterback at least 2 or 3 games. So you better have somebody that can at least be competent. But I like the fact that these 2 dudes are best friends. They go at each other, so nothing we say will break them.
Yeah.
So, and they are lockstep on the mission. Like, I want to be the best. I want to be the best. And I know he could play, but I still want to be out. I want to outdo him. And I love the fact that they compete that way, because on the field they have what it takes, because they both have to come up from FCS programs. They both have to do those things that small school guys have to do, but they did it on a Power 4 level. And Ward did at 2 schools. So I'm glad those guys are battle-tested. So I think they could handle anything that comes their way, whatever franchise they ends up on.
From a trait standpoint, how big is the gap between the 2 of them?
Not big at all, because I brought this up earlier, because they win in certain ways. It's like when we say who you would rather, Biggie or Pac. It's like, man, I kind of like both songs. Like, they both got good music, right? And you don't have to pick. We never did that with Michael Jackson or Prince. You just enjoy the music. So you can just enjoy the quarterback play, because one guy stylistically is like Joe Burrow in both the positives and the negatives. That's Shedeur. One guy stylistically is like Patrick Mahomes, positives and negatives, and that's Cam Ward. Now, Ward may not have the stronger arm of Mahomes, but the same type of plays and the same type of game style that we heard about him coming out the air raid, we're hearing about Cam Ward. And they play the same way. They both have that mindset of like, yeah, I could buy time because I know I can get it there. Like, so what? Yeah, you're covering my receiver, but guess what? I'm going to thread this needle. Yeah, I probably should have thrown that football away, but I thought I could get outside and I took a 40-yard sack. That's Shedeur, right? But game on the line, I'm going to throw 2 back-to-back accurate Hail Marys. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that type of stuff, other stuff, we can coach you out of it. But those key traits, that's what you kind of have to have.
Yeah, and this is something that I've just had to remind myself the more combine and more draft seasons that I do. Like, it's people get so caught up in reasons not to draft a guy that they almost start to, or at least conversationally, they start to overtake the reasons why these guys are at the top of the draft. If you had to pick one tape for each of them that encompass the full experience, the Titans fans, if they're still getting to know these guys in the process, which two tapes for either of them would you highlight?
I would say Cam Ward's opening game against Florida, because that's the first time he's with these group of guys. And this is the first time we see this Miami team against a Florida team. And, everybody made the whole all season, all we were talking about, SEC. And this is the first game out the gate, right?
And he balled.
He balled out and kind of had recruits changing their minds in the stands. We saw that viral video. So I would say Cam versus Miami. And for Shedeur, I would go and look at the game they played against Kansas State, because even though they lost that game, think about what was going on in that game. Like, it was a back and forth affair. And the last time Shedeur had the football, we saw him drive the team down the field, get what looked to have been the game-winning touchdown until K-State went right down the field. And so, but we saw him have to battle back from, they were down double digits, battle back in that game, then get the lead, only for the defense to lose it. But you left that game like they didn't lose because of Shedeur. They lost because the defense gave up a big play. They couldn't stop the wheel route. And so I think both of those games kind of gives you reasons why those guys you can kind of trust, because they're both battle-tested.
Emory Hunt of CBS Sports is sitting down with us here at the Scouting Combine. You can follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan.
Emory, I'm curious because clearly you are really high on both of these guys, and with the variance in skill set like you're talking about, if you were to transport yourself 5 years from now, which of these two prospects gets you the most excited for the possibilities that could be Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders in 2030 in terms of the upside that they show you?
That's a great question, because I'm going to answer it this way. Shedeur Ward, Cam Sanders. Like, both guys. Guys, listen. I've been around the world twice, spoke to everybody once. Like, you're not going to get me. You know what I'm saying? I've been lockstep with this from day one. I will say this, though. Both guys excite me for different reasons. Shedeur, because he's always had to be Deion's son. And in his mind, he's the last one, right?
Yeah.
Because the other two didn't have the athleticism, and the fact when he plays quarterback, there's a lot of pressure. Everybody's waiting for him to. So I like that he is able to compete through that. For Ward, I was a 0-star recruit. I was at Incarnate Word in San Antonio, Tom Benson Field, and I had to go to Washington State. And nobody gave me credit there, even though I'm at a Power 4 school. I declared for the draft. They was like, oh, well, he's going to be a third-round pick. You know what? I'll go back. I'm going to go to Miami. Miami's been dormant for a couple of years. Ain't really been relevant. I'm going to make them a relevant team. And relevant right away to where you was like, if Miami had any defense, they might be a postseason team. So both of those players excite me because of how they got to the process. And they're going to do some things that wow you. Like, I always joke about Shedeur Sanders and how he thinks he's more athletic than he is until, within the game, he'll take off and like, oh, wow, it's almost like what everybody in the country sat there and watched Joe Burrow rip off that 50-yard run against the Giants. Like, yo, where that come from? You know what I'm saying? So Shedeur has some of that. And for Ward, it's the legitimate arm arrogance. Like,
arm arrogance is such a great
You see
phrase.
The dude throwing the football through somebody's life. And the dude is standing there, and it's like, he's not going to get this. And then, bink, it goes right past him into the hands for a Xavier Restrepo touchdown. So I like both guys for different traits. I think that's what excites me the most about. That's why I'm so high on these guys, because they both have those traits. I was this way about the Watson and Mahomes class. And for full disclosure, my third quarterback that year, because I don't want people to say, like, well, who was number 3? I was a big Deshaun Kaiser fan. Yeah. Didn't work out, but that's how high I was on that class. And I am on this class.
No, the league told you that guy was a second-round pick. I mean, it wasn't. You weren't so far off based on the analysis. It didn't work out in the league.
It didn't work out. And the league also tried to say Lamar Jackson was 32nd pick. We know how the league gets sometimes.
Buddy, I had Bill Polian out here talking about him as a wide receiver. That's a Hall of Fame executive.
I'm about to say, shout out to Bill Polian, built the Buffalo Bills 4 straight Super Bowls. Find someone that could say that, right? So I will give Bill Polian credit. But, yeah, the NFL doesn't always get it right, but they're pretty doggone close. Yeah.
Lucas, you have another one?
Yeah, one more. Emory, Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio over here talks all the time about the belly of the draft. And we were just talking, Buck and I, about how exhaustive the conversation has been about these quarterbacks, and for a good reason. But if I were to give you 3 positions of need for the Titans in this draft that they could address in the belly of the draft, right, days 2 and 3, edge, wide receiver, and offensive tackle, which of those 3 positions do you get most excited about in terms of the options that could be there, say, in the 4th round?
Wide receiver, by nature of what this thing is. Back in the day, I say back in the day, but back in my day, and I say back in my day, but you're talking about late 90s to early 2000s, it was all about the point of attack. And then the game got wider. It became the CFL at the NCAA level. So we're seeing more receivers and more defensive backs be readily available, all the way to the 8th round undrafted, right, that I like to call it. So I would say wide receiver because of you're seeing more 3, 4, 5 wide receiver sets, so guys are getting more routes on air, more time on task. So you're going to get more of those dudes that can run routes and those dudes that can cover. So defensive back and wide receiver are going to always be the deepest until we get back to a more balanced game.
And Lord knows the Titans need wide receiver help at this point in time. That Calvin Ridley, ended up coming on late, and we talked to Brian Callahan on the show yesterday. Emory, he said it took him about half of the season to kind of figure out the best possible usage, and that's normal, I think, for a first-time play caller and a first-time head coach, especially when you're working against the level of quarterback play that they were getting. The numbers in this draft, defensive line comes up a lot, but what do you think about the offensive line generally, from tackle to interior?
I think we're seeing a lot more athleticism. Guys got leaner bodies. Guys are more apt to be out on the move because of what the game has become, a spread game. It's 5-on-5, essentially, because we're seeing those spread sets. So you got to be able to quickly get into your quick sets. You got to be able to move your footwork, your hands. I'm finding a lot of guys can have quick hands, and they're able to win the hands first battle. So the quickness and athleticism of the offensive line class and the group right now has been impressive. We're seeing more guys that can legitimately move more so than anything.
Who are you looking forward to talking to today on HQ? I saw you already sitting down with some prospects. Who have you talked to already, and who are you looking forward to talking to?
James Pierce out of Tennessee. Big fan of him. He compared this game to Lawrence Taylor. I like that because it shows he's watched the game. You know what I'm saying? I'm always a big fan to see who's actually been watching football.
Cares about the history.
Cares about the history, because kids nowadays don't watch stuff, right? They think the game started with them. And so I like that he knows older players. I can't wait to Jahad Campbell was fun to talk to. Great personality. He's a big Adam Sandler guy.
Okay.
And so I had him blind rank his Adam Sandler movies. He put Waterboy 4th. I was shocked. That's
what
number
was
one.
His
one? He's Zohan. He likes Zohan.
Underrated.
Did you just yell underrated from the ether?
Zohan does not get enough love in the Sandler catalog.
I was like, where's Big Daddy? But, at the end of the day,
Come on.
These so good. I can't wait to talk to Walter Nolan. I love seeing these Happy Gilmore. I'm a big Billy Madison guy then, but you watch it now, it's probably not the best. But Big Daddy, carries long. And Wedding Singer, he didn't even mention that. That was a great one, too. But Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. Big defensive tackles with thin ankles, I'm always a fan of because they could collapse pocket like Dexter Lawrence.
There are so many different body types. Like, people get caught up in interior defensive line, like they're all the same kind of player, right? Just big 300-pounders or whatever. Not when, especially when you look at the diversity of skill sets from this particular interior defensive line class, Emory, because you bring up Walter Nolan. He's just such a talented player. And I'm so curious to see which team decides to go with him, because he's obviously got tremendous upside, but he does a lot of things differently than some of the other players who might be at the top of the defensive line class.
People underestimate the athleticism of the big guy. And that's why I had Dexter Lawrence as my number 1 nose tackle, and people was like, you said in your notes he can collapse. He's an underrated pass rusher. Like, yeah, people don't. He was asked to 2-gapping at Clemson. But he can collapse the pocket. Look at his ankles. Look how quick he is off the ball. You apply that to him getting up the field on one shoulder, he can do that. And Nolan is the same way. Collapse the pocket while creating pressure, opens things up for everybody on the outside.
He's a monster, certainly this year before the injury. Emory Hunt, also a monster when it comes to the draft analysis. Buddy, always good to see you. Thanks for stopping by.
My guy, appreciate it. Look at it. In the deep voice. I love the deep voice, man. Warms my soul.
Good, because it pisses everybody else off. Get out of here. Go get on HQ. That's Emory Hunt hanging out with us. Coming up next, you got some observations, Lucas.
I have various observations. We're whipping around multiple sports here.
All right. I'm Buck Reisig. It's 104.5 The Zone.